Hey everyone, welcome back, and here's my BIS gearing guide for Phase 2 for mages. First, I'm just kind of give you a little overview of what I'm going to go over. First, I'll be talking about why there isn't a 25-man normal only BIS list, and why that just doesn't make sense. So we'll talk about that. Then I'm going to go over the different DPS differences of the different specs, as well as different gearing paths, i.e. for Starshard Edge versus Staff, and just some other things so you can kind of see the DPS differences, and then use Grass for that, provided from Safari94, so you can thank him for that once again, as well as a histogram provided from him, giving us some interesting information in regards to differences between the specs. So check that out. I'm then going to go over 4 different sets for each of the different 3 specs, so Arcane+FFB and Fire Torment the Weak, and the 4 different sets are Actual BIS versus Realistic BIS, and then Starshard Edge versus Hodir Staff. So altogether 12 different sets there, and their BIS differences. I'm going to give kind of an overview for each of those ones, and then after that I'm going to go in depth on each slot using the Realistic Staff set for going in depth on each of those different slots. And then finally I'll cover what I'm thinking about for Thatsmybis, as well as in a kind of an optimal gearing path. And I also just have sections on some 10-man items to be looking out for, some 25-man items to be looking out for, and then which items also carry into Phase 3. There's still BIS even for Phase 3 BIS. Alright, so first I want to talk about why there isn't a 25-man normal only BIS list. And if you already understand BIS lists and you don't care about this, you don't need to hear this part, then yeah, skip ahead to the other sections. But for those of you who are wondering why, the reason is because, you know, BIS list, the way a BIS list works is it's the combination of items that gives you the value of it being BIS, okay? So, and a lot of it has to do with hit and finding the right combination of everything to give you the most DPS. The value of one item will change based on the other items that are on that character. And so for 25-man normal only, a lot of those items can look a lot different than when you start to include hard modes, even just some hard modes. And you're going to be incrementally doing the hard mode fights over as the phase progresses. That's the whole point. And so the whole point of the BIS list is so that you're going to work towards it to have those items by the end of the phase. You're not expected to get it right away. If you try and use a 25-man normal only BIS list for just the first few weeks, it's going to bait you into getting items that are going to be not worthwhile later on. You know, like chest, tier 8 chest is what we're going to be using later on, but maybe this chest, Robes of the Umbral Brute, is actually what's going to be used in a 25-man normal only. But that doesn't make sense, because your guild should be gearing out people with the tier that are going to need that and use that in the long run, so that gets most efficiently put out for those first, you know, number of weeks where everyone still needs tier. And so if you use this instead of the chest, then it just doesn't make sense, because then you're taking tier in another slot that you're not going to need later on as you start to clear to the hard modes. That's just one example, but there's many. Okay, so that's why, you know, go through the different sections I have for each of the different slots, pay attention to some of the things that I point out as, you know, good upgrades or alternates and things like that. You can pick up those items, and then let the other items go to other people, because you're going to just replace them later on, and it'd just be kind of a waste going to you once you have those hard modes. Now, sure, that's the case for a lot of people with the hard modes, but that's why you just pay attention to what's actually going to make sense for you. The ones that I mentioned, like, hey, pick this up if it's not rotting, but that's it. You don't want to go for a 25-man normal only BIS list. Also because, like, there's just so many different combinations of BIS lists that you could have. Like, you know, with 10-mans and 10-man hard modes, for that 25-man normal only BIS list, do I include 10-mans? Do I include 10-man hard modes? Do I include just half the 10-man hard modes? Do I include all the 10-man hard modes? And then also, you know, you're going to... am I making this for a guild that's going to be doing just some hard modes, or do I, you know, are they going to do all the 25-man hard modes by the end of it, all of them except Algalon? Because again, it comes down to the combination of items. So each of those BIS lists could look a little bit different, and so everyone should be progressing and trying to get down all the hard modes. Now, your guild might not get all of them done by the end of the phase, so again, that's going to come down to you figuring out what's realistic for your guild. What are they going for first for the hard modes? What are you guys thinking you're going to? And then just tailoring that set based on those expectations. But it's not something that, you know, in that case, I can't make a BIS list for every single different guild's expectations of where they plan to get to by the end of the phase. It just doesn't make sense. And BIS lists, they work on that combination of items. You gotta understand that. There isn't just some number one item, hard mode, and you go to 25-man only, then there's just the next item is this for 25-man. No, it could be a number of different items based on the other items, and what other, what other items are available for the other slots in the pool. You have to understand that. So it's not just so that easy. It could be a number of different items, and it's figuring out the different combination of all the different items that are available. So it's not something that you can just easily make like that. So that's why you have to just kind of plan towards the end game, the end phase, and just tailor it for your guild and what their expectations are, and go through the rest of the guide. Listen to kind of some of the items I mentioned and everything, and you should be able to figure that out. If anything, hit me up during stream. I can help you out. That's the best time to ask me questions. But good luck. That's why I'm not making it, and that's why other guide makers are not making a bunch of other BIS lists for all these different things. It's too much. It's already enough having to do it for 2 different weapon gearing paths and also 3 different specs. Like, that right there has been a pain in the ass. Yeah, doing it for then also non-hard mode, and which hard modes do you include? What about 10 man, 25 man? It's too much. It's not possible. So first, for those who haven't seen this sheet, which I talked about in my previous video, this sheet was developed by Savari94, and you can see it's just a DPS comparison of the different specs in Phase 2 BIS. Here, basically, the gist is that Arcane is ahead of Fire, and that Fire versus Fire Torment the Weak versus FFB, you have to decide that for your own. It depends on your situation. I discussed this in the previous video, in the All the War Specs video. There's a guide and a section on that, so check that out. But the bottom line is that it comes down to your situation as far as how easy you're going to be able to gear up Fire Torment the Weak, who your focus magic target is, if you're getting to focus magic yourself, etc. So all those things are going to play into whether you should go Fire Torment the Weak and FFB, and I'll also be talking about the different sets here and which I recommend. Spoilers, it's going to be FFB just because it's easier to gear towards Arcane and FFB simultaneously, but that could be different for your situation. You can gear towards Arcane and Fire Torment Week, but it's going to depend on your situation and how loot is flowing and loot prio and everything like that. So you're going to have to talk to your guild. You're going to have to think a little bit on it. There's no just easy answer I can give you. And then down here, and this is obviously linked in the description, you can see that there's different comparisons for Arcane, Frostfire, and Fire for different gearing paths. And the purpose of this is just to show that the DPS difference between these different gearing paths really isn't that big, or at least to show it. And then the point is that it's really not that big. So for here, for instance, SS refers to Starshard. So this is the Elgalon weapon. So this is actual BIS basically for Arcane. That's the DPS there. Here's obviously a graph as well. We see Starshard tier 8 2-piece, which is the actual BIS, versus Staff actual BIS. So if you went Staff instead of Starshard Edge, right? Everyone's like, Starshard Edge. The DPS difference is only about 40 DPS for Staff actual BIS versus Starshard actual BIS. And obviously actual BIS, not using tier 8 4-piece, that's obviously you're getting a lot. You're getting 3 off pieces there. That could be a little unrealistic. So if you go to a more realistic comparison, Starshard and tier 8 4-piece versus Staff tier 8 4-piece, then you're only looking at about a 20 DPS difference. So Staff is not a bad option. And spoilers again, that is actually what I'll be recommending to go, just because it's an easier gearing path. I'm not saying you should go that way. Starshard is still a viable way. Depends on your loot situation, but this is just showing the DPS differences between these different gearing paths. And then similarly for Frostfire, we can see that, and for Fire. Now for Fire, tier 8 4-piece is just better than tier 8 2-piece. The off pieces don't outweigh the tier 8 4-piece bonus. So that makes this a little simpler as far as a comparison. So then it just comes down to Starshard tier 8 4-piece versus Staff. You guys can't see it because I'm blocking it. Starshard tier 8 4-piece versus Staff tier 8 4-piece, which is a little bit more of a significant difference. You're looking at about 100 DPS, but nothing too crazy. And then for Frostfire, Starshard tier 8 4-piece versus Staff tier 8 4-piece, only about a 20-some DPS difference. So if you go Staff, Frostfire is not a bad choice. But if you're going Starshard, maybe you do go Fire Torment the Weak. That just has to do with scaling, hit, and some other things. And then here, the reason with people have asked this a lot since this sheet obviously has been circulating before this video came out. I've been asking, why is it that tier 8 2-piece is better than tier 8 4-piece for Frostfire build? The main reason is because that, well, one, your Pyroblast is not benefiting from Torment the Weak with Frostfire build. So right, so your Pyroblast, the 4-piece bonus, isn't benefiting Frostfire build as much as it's benefiting Fire. The other reason is that Frostfire build doesn't need the hit as much as Fire Torment the Weak, right? Because Frostfire Bolt double dips from precision. So the extra hit on the tier pieces doesn't do Frostfire that much good in comparison. It's better to have those off pieces with the juicy stats and to drop some of that hit than Frostfire, just because Frostfire doesn't need as much hit as Fire Torment a week. Those are the big reasons, and yeah, just the main thing is also just the 4-piece bonus just doesn't do as much for FFB as it does for Fire, and the off pieces are just 20 item levels higher than the tier pieces. So those are juicy stats, and so those juicy stats just outweigh the 4-piece bonus for Frostfire build. Now, it's still maybe unrealistic to get those off pieces, to expect to get them, right? You probably should just be expecting to be rocking tier 8 4 pieces FFB, but actual BIS is actual BIS, so we still have to at least talk about it. And another thing that Safari has added to the spreadsheet is a histogram showing that the different sim iterations for Fire Torment the Weak, Frostfire, and Arcane. And the big takeaway here is that the Arcane curve is just a lot more tight, and so it's going to be a lot more consistent in hitting its closer to its averages, while the Frostfire and Fire, they have a lot more variance, right? It's a lot flatter of a curve, and because of that flatness, you can see that there are times when Fire Torment Week, you know, its high end can be performing as good as Arcane's high end, right? If this was a lot tighter of a curve, then you wouldn't necessarily have that, and Arcane's top end wouldn't be able to be matched, but Fire and Frostfire are flatter, and so if you get lucky with it, it can perform as well, but on average, Arcane is definitely going to be performing more consistently and more consistently better than Fire Torment the Weak and Frostfire, which I know does not seem to make much sense because of Barrage, Missile Barrage RNG, but that's what the sim is showing, and so as long as you just trust in missile gambling, you know, that is the case, and so it's just it's a unfortunate truth that we have to acknowledge. Now, if we're talking about the different sets, I have them all kind of lined up here at the top. There's, you know, 12 different ones. Again, like I mentioned before, it's going to be going into the 2 different weapon gearing paths, so Starshard Edge versus Staff, and then it's also going to be going into all 3 specs for those, so 12 total, and I'm doing it, it's always going to be Arcane, FFB, then Fire Torment the Weak, as I'm clicking through these and talking about them. And first I'm going to be going over actual BIS, then I'll be going into Starshard pathing, but more realistic as opposed to actual BIS, more realistic BIS. Then it'll be going into staff realistic, and then from staff realistic, I'll touch on the differences between staff realistic and staff actual BIS. Now, first for actual BIS, I mean, I don't know exactly what there is necessarily to say here, because I don't think this set really applies to anyone other than the people who are just like huge loot whores, or that are in GDKPs and you got a lot of gold, and so you're just able to buy everything, in which case, you know, the links are going to be in the description. You can just pull them up and just buy as you go. So, you know, there's not really necessarily too much to talk about here because it doesn't really apply to too many people, but actual BIS is actual BIS, so we got to touch on it at least a little. The big things here for Arcane, FFB, and Fire Torment the Weak is that, you know, for FFB and Arcane, again, they have that tier 8 2-piece, and then they're using off pieces. And for the off pieces, it's Helm, it's Crown of Luminescence, and then also obviously gloves. Now everything, all of them use for their off piece pretty much Pharaoh's gloves for the most part. But you know, Arcane and FFB are also using the Helm, like I mentioned, which is from Mimiron hard mode, and Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, which are from Freya hard mode. And that's just, again, because of the reasons I previously stated. And then for the tier A 2 pieces, yeah, it's obviously shoulders and chest. And the differences between these, you know, there's a little bit of boots differences, which is just very minor. These for Fire and FFB, treads of the False Oracle and boots of Fiery Resolution, very similar, within 10 DPS of each other. So that's just a minor thing. The other big thing, though, is that FFB and Fire Torment the Weak want Pendant of Fiery Havoc, the Flame Leviathan hard mode neck, while Arcane wants the Sapphire, which is the Iron Council hard mode neck, because it doesn't have any hit on it. So Arcane doesn't need that, with Starshard and Cosmos both providing so much hit. And the other difference to mention is that for Fire Torment the Weak, it's of course using tier 8 4-piece. And then these are all obviously for Horde, and that's because even as Alliance, you don't necessarily know if you're going to get a Draenei and get that Heroic Presence, the 1% hit. If you are going to get that 1% hit, though, the main thing that you're going to do for the FFB and the Arcane sets is you can just drop Petrified Ivy Sprig, and you can pick up Scepter of Lost Souls instead. So the Petrified Ivy Sprig is from Freya hard mode 10-man, and so most people should be able to get that from doing 10 mans. Still going to be a little contested though, of course, because a number of people want it. But then if you're Alliance and you're able to get that and you got everything else, then Scepter of Lost Souls, that's a great item to just be able to switch between it if you're getting Heroic Presence or not getting it. And this just drops from normal mode general basics. Not too many people need it. Most people, their Petrified Ivy Sprig is their BIS, but obviously if you're Alliance, a lot of people are probably going to want this just because it's an easy item to swap in if you don't need the hit. Alright, so even though I mentioned previously that I recommend people go staff, let's say you're going to go Starshard Edge, you just really want it, or you're just the ordained person to get it. Obviously somebody has to get it, whatever the reason may be. You know, I get it. You know, it's an RPG. You want a Starshard Edge, it's a cool looking weapon. I understand. I'm the same way. I might go Starshard Edge. I haven't fully decided yet. I really think staff's kind of the way, but you know, maybe you do you. You want to do Starshard Edge. It works for your situation, whatever it may be. Okay, so then Starshard Edge. You want to go more realistic. Here's the more realistic. I know you're looking at this and right away you're thinking, this has tier 8 2-piece. It still has off pieces. That doesn't make sense. How is this more realistic? All right, well, bear with me. So Collar of the Worm Hunter drops from Razor Scale. It's item level 232, but it's definitely better than the item level 232 tier 8 Helm. So, you know, this has a lot of hit that Arcane doesn't need. This has less hit and also a ton of haste instead of the spirit that the tier 8 Helm has on it. And no one else really needs this. It's just, if anything, just an off piece that people could use, but no one else can use an off. Like, no one's... people are gonna rather use their tier 8 Helm most likely than this, from what I understand, right? It's only Arcane where we get like no benefit from our 4-piece for the most part, that, you know, this would be better. So this is just a free thing that you could probably get, and then you could use it for Arcane instead of using the tier 8 Helm, and it's just a nice little off piece. Leggings the Enslaved Idol. I know that's, again, that seems like a 252 off piece that, you know, other people should want, but if you go to the Fusion, here we go, the Fusion Prio spreadsheet, you can see that there really isn't any other casters other than Boomies that want Leggings of the Enslaved Idol. So even though they'll probably get the first Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, most likely, if you just have one Boom Kit in there, if it drops again, good chance you could get it then. So this isn't unrealistic. This is fairly realistic. Now, obviously, Crown of Luminescence, that's, you know, Warlocks need that, other people need that. You're already, as Mage, for at least for Fusion, when it comes to off pieces, we're already getting Prio'd Pharaoh's Gloves, so also getting Prio'd something like Crown of Luminescence, very unlikely, right? Especially because for this, for Starshard, you're already getting, if you are going the Starshard route, then you're getting 2 Elgalon weapons, Starshard and Cosmos, as opposed to, and also then Pharaoh's. You know, you're looking at a lot of Elgalon loot there, and so for you to also then get a Crown of Luminescence is very unlikely. But Collar of the Worm Hunter and Leggings, that's actually not too unrealistic. And then Pharaoh's Gloves, you know, this, we're doing it proud because it benefits Fire Mage the most. It just benefits mages really well. Arcane it's also really good for, and then Fire Mages it's huge just because haste and crit are both really good for fire. They both scale pretty evenly, so this is just it benefits the mage the most. So there's a good chance that if you're also playing fire, that you could be benefited this, and you could be playing fire in the future. So if your guild cares about you playing fire in the future, which it should, good chance you should be proud of these. So that's not necessarily unrealistic. And then as far as other items, you know, this is just standard stuff I'm going to talk about. I'll go into more detail for each piece and slotting in the future. I'm just trying to touch on some different things that are specific to this set. And then the FFB set, the reason that this is more realistic, I call it the quote-unquote realistic version. This is kind of just my take on what I think is realistic. Again, it's realistic BIS, not actual BIS, right? So don't come at me like, oh, I simmed a little higher with it. Like, yeah, I know. This is just supposed to be something realistic. You can then go this exact same loot for FFB, right? They use the exact same, as you can see here, with the only difference being tier 8 4-piece for FFB versus that those off pieces for the Arcane, which again, those off pieces are essentially free. Now, Boots of Fiery Resolution are a little bit better for Arcane. They're like, you know, say 30 DPS, but for but they're also a lot more contested. So Treads of the False Oracle are going to be just easier to get. And as far as FFB, Treads of the False Oracle are about equivalent to the Boots of Fire Resolution. They're within 10 DPS of each other. So you could go either. And so because these are with our prio sheet and the way we're doing the Yogg Saron loot, We're prioing Treads of the False Oracle to fire, or to mage, and then it's Boomy and Nelly because for Boots of Fire Re-Resolution, you have Warlocks and Shadow Priests that need that. So it's just more realistic if you go the Treads of the False Oracle route. Again, could be different for your situation though. So if that's the case, if it's easier for you to get Boots of Flame Leviathan, then go that route. And then as you can see for Fire Torment the Weak does need the Flame Leviathan neck, and it also needs the hit cloak. Okay, just because even with Starshard and the extra hit, you're using 4-piece and everything, it still needs more hits. So this is kind of the issue with going for Arcane and Fire Torment the Weak. There's advantages to Fire Torment the Weak. It just makes gearing a little more difficult, right? Fire Torment the Weak can pick up that magic absorption. Again, I talked about it in the previous video, so check that out as far as the differences, but it is more annoying to gear it up. So it kind of just comes down to how your guild is going to be doing loot prio, and if it's, you know, reasonable for you to get Pendant of Fiery Havoc, even with other people needing it. This cloak is actually less contested than the Algalon cloak, according to our loot prio. But, you know, for Arcane, that's a lot of hit that you don't need is the only thing. So there's just some things to think about as far as what to do for your situation. Now, as for reasons why I prefer Staff over Starshard, I guess I'll talk about them here. And the main reason is because, well, one, it's just a lot of hit from these two items, and Turning Tide doesn't have any hit. So, you know, going from Turning Tide to Starshard might be a little difficult with your hit situation, while Staff doesn't have any hit on it at all. So it's a lot easier to just go straight from Turning Tide to Staff. Now, your offhand from next, you know, you might be using Matriarch Spawn, which doesn't have hit, but you also might be using Surplus Limb, which does have hit. And so, you know, sure, yes, you're going from some hit to less by going from Turning Tide with that Surplus Limb to the Hodir Staff. However, it's not that much hit. You could probably make it up for someone. It's a little different with Starshard Edge. The other thing is Starshard Edge is not better than Hodir Staff, the 252 one, of course. I'm talking about 25 man, until you get Cosmos. And Mage Sim actually shows item level. There are no other 252 offhands. It's just Cosmos, okay? And so even if you had Iron Mender or something like that, a 232 one, it's still going to be performing worse until you get Cosmos, and you can also make good use of the hit on both Starshard Edge and that offhand, okay? So it's just a lot more difficult to make it's more of the long run, right? The long-term play to make Starshard Edge and Cosmos work and outplay Staff, essentially. Additionally, you're talking about two Algalon items right there. Now, I know Starshard Edge also drops from Imran, but right, people don't look at it like that, okay? So they're going to look at it like it's an Algalon weapon. So if you're getting two items from Algalon, and then you're also trying to get Pharaoh's Gloves and Star Watcher's Binding, you know, good luck. And also, you know, when it comes to those, right, again, we look at item level here. There's Hand Wraps of the Vigilant, but they don't compare to Pharaoh's Gloves, okay? Pharaoh's Gloves are just super good. They're like 120 DPS above Hand Wraps of the Vigilant. Now, they're less contested, so you could go Hand Wraps of the Vigilant if you wanted to for your off-piece, your glove off-piece. But Pharaoh's Gloves are way better. And if you're getting Starshard Edge and Cosmos, good chance you're not also going to get Pharaoh's Gloves and not also going to get Star Watcher's Binding unless you're in a GDKP. You're able to, I don't know, you're outplaying everyone in your guild, so they're fine with you taking whatever. I don't know. It'd be kind of just a very atypical scenario for it to be the case, because then Star Watcher's Binding is also Algalon loot, right? And it's, again, the only belt that is 252. Everything else is 20 item levels lower. Now, Stash Evasion Power is actually really good if you can make use of the hit, but still, you're talking about something. If you're getting these two, it's a good chance you're not getting these two. And so, you know, getting these and not getting these versus Staff getting, you know, Staff plus these two, the Staff is going to win every time. So Starshard Edge and Cosmos, going the Starshard route, it can work in the long run. By the time Phase 3 gets here, I think you could even out to if you're going Staff, depending on your gearing situation or whatever. But just know that Staff is going to ramp up as a lot faster than Starshard Edge, just because of just the way loot is and how it's going to go, given these things that I've talked about. And it has the potential to just, in the long term, also outplay Starshard Edge with just because of that gearing pathing, right? So those are just some things to keep in mind, and why I'm not the biggest fan of Starshard Edge unless you have the ability to drop a bunch of fat cash at GDKP, you know, like something like what I do, right? I run my own splits, so I'll get some main raid items, and then towards the end of the phase, if I still need some items, I can go to a GDKP and I can buy those last big items that I wouldn't get because I've already received a fair amount of loot, or vice versa. I could start the phase in the GDKP, buy up a bunch of stuff, and then join the main raid. So that's just, you know, something to keep in mind, and those are kind of the reasons why I do think that staff is a better option than Starshard, Edge, and Cosmos. But I get it if you want to get those too. You know, they're cool weapons. Maybe you're not super into min-max. That's not all about the numbers. I get it. It's also an RPG. You gotta enjoy it. And I guess that's a good time to also just touch on why I think that Arcane and FFB is the way to go, because I've already been kind of talking about it some. And yeah, it mainly just comes down to that gearing situation. It's just really hard to, or it's just more difficult to gear for both Arcane and Fire Torment the Weak optimally, right? If you do Arcane and FFB, both sets can be gaining kind of at the same time, and both of your sets are going to be looking good. Now there's some differences, right? Like for instance, you know, you're still gonna have to make the choice of, like, if you're going Treads of the False Oracle, because you're gonna be able to get those versus Boots of Fiery Resolution. You know, doesn't really matter which one you go for fire, but Boots of Fiery Resolution are a little better for Arcane. So there's little things like that. There's little concessions you'll have to make, just because, you know, you can't get all your full BIS. Like, if Boots of Fiery Resolution are super contested and these aren't, it's just better to go these and just accept the fact that, yeah, these are about 30 DPS less for Arcane, but that just kind of is what it is. But the concessions when you're going for both Arcane and Fire Torment the Weak can just kind of suck, because you're going to have to get hit gear. You kind of have to get the hit gear for Fire Torment the Weak that Arcane just doesn't need. And depending on which way you're going. Again, we're talking about Starshard here, where you're going to want Sun Glimmer for Arcane. You'll see in some of the later sets, I do actually recommend Drape and Mortal Downfall, just because it's an easier, more realistic gearing path. In a sense, but you know, this has crit on it that Arcane doesn't need, and so if you're going Starshard and you have to get this, then your Arcane set's going to suffer. So you're kind of just choosing which one's going to suffer. And right now in Alduar, you kind of use both. You know, the way I look at it, there's 4 fights that you use fire on, and the rest you use Arcane on, and then that could change in the future as fights get shorter or whatnot. But you know, Firefighter Freya, Hodir, and Yogg, I definitely view fire as being better. And we'll see with TOGC and whatnot, but I still see this being the case, where some fights are going to be Arcane and some fights are going to be fire going forward. And so, you know, I think you should, if you're playing Mage optimally, you'll have both sets. You're ready to play both specs, you have a set for each, and that's what you're going to do. And it's just a lot easier to do Arcane and FFB. Now, your situation might be different. Maybe you just really like Fire Torment Weak. You want to make sure you get Focus Magic for that person, even if it means one of your sets is going to suffer. I get it. Sure, then go for it. But my recommendation is just Arcane and FFB, just because it's a lot easier, because otherwise you're going to have to be doubling up on items in order to do BIS for both. And that just, to me, doesn't seem realistic. I can't recommend a realistic BIS set for both Arcane and Fire Torment the Weak without one taking a hit, right? It just doesn't exist, right? You just, one needs Pendant and Drape, and the other one doesn't, and depending on which way you go, you're going to take a hit, and the chances of you getting both necks and both cloaks, extremely unlikely, unless you're in a unique situation, such as going to GKP and buying both, or whatever it may be. So that's just kind of why I think Arcane FFB is just a way to go, because FFB and Fire Torment Weak are already very close on DPS. It comes down to your situation with Focus Magic and everything, and even if you have full BIS Fire Torment Weak and full BIS FFB, and you have a better Focus Magic target with Torment Weak, it's still only 100 DPS ahead then. And if you don't have a good Focus Magic target, Fire Torment Weak is only about 50 DPS ahead, and it requires just a lot more gearing, right? Because you're, or at least if you go full Fire Torment Weak, then your Arcane set is going to be suffering. While with FFB, it's not. Your Arcane set is not going to have suffered, and it's still going to be pumping. So that's just overall why I recommend going Arcane FFB, or why I like that. It's just a lot easier to gear towards it, and I can't really do good recommendations for both gearing towards Arcane and Fire Torment Weak. You're just gonna have to accept some concessions if you decide to go that route. It's up to you again, but yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the set that I really kind of recommend, which is the Staff Realistic BIS set, because I just think it's the easiest gearing path out of the bunch to go. And I'm also going to talk about Staff Actual, just so you can see the differences there, and just kind of go over it as a whole. And then I'm going to go into each slot in depth using the Staff Realistic sets. So First thing to mention, just with the staff realistic sets, is you can see that it's using the 2-piece that I've kind of explained before. Again, that collar of the Worm Hunter is not too hard to get because it's razor scale. No one else really needs it. Other people are going to be using their tier 8 Helm, so this shouldn't go to them because this is something that you actually could just use for the rest of the game as Arcane, because it's unlikely you'll get chronoluminescence. And then, although I'll come back to that on the chronoluminescence part. And then Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, the Freya 25-man hard mode, like I had mentioned before, but in case you didn't already watch. For that loot, it's going to, well, actually Mage first, but I'd say you could go to the Boomy first because we're already getting probably some other stuff. That's just me, but yeah. Okay, so but even if it is going to the Boomy first, right? Then that's still just, you probably just have one Boomkin in the raid. There's still a good chance that you could get these after the Boomkin, so it's not unrealistic to plan to get these, okay? Some other things to mention, you want to get the hit cloak, and that's the reason that's the realistic choice is because not as many people need this. The Elgalon cloak, though, however, a lot of people need that. I mean, kind of most everyone, right? And it's going to be Proud Physical first because they don't have a caster piece like we do. The only other caster one is Drape Immortal Downfall, and so it'd be, just a while waiting, especially if you're not killing Elgalon pretty early in the phase. Unlikely you'd get this before phase 3, right? Well, there's a chance that you could get this. So Drape Immortal Downfall is the way to go for there. It's just more realistic than trying to get the Elgalon cloak. The DPS neck, just because this is very contested, and if you just go this gearing route, then you don't need the hit on the neck. But on that note, said I'd come back to it. So chronoluminescence, if there's a chance that you can get this, which is unlikely with just getting everything else, but if there is a chance that you can get this, then that means you won't have the hit from Collar or the Worm Hunter, so you will want the Flame Leviathan neck. So, talk to your guild. Again, if you're getting all this other stuff, then unlikely you can get this. And this is kind of the best, most recommended gearing path based on the loot prio that, Fusion has done for a spreadsheet, just as well as just in general. So I wouldn't switch it up and go chronoluminescence instead of some of these other off pieces. But if you can get chronoluminescence as well, for whatever reason, maybe you just hop out for a week in a GDKP, I don't know, whatever your situation is, just make sure then you do want to go the Flame Leviathan neck. And so this is where I'll actually then switch over to the actual BIS. So if you're going to be using chronoluminescence, then yeah, you want to get the Flame Leviathan neck. And what you can also then do is you can go the Elgalon cloak route. Now again, that's if you're getting chronoluminescence, I assume maybe you can get this and use Sash of Ancient Power actually instead of the Star Watcher's Binding. So then there's one less Elgalon loot you need. So maybe you can say, well, instead of the belt, could I get the cloak? Because the cloak is kind of just it drops every week in a way because it's a quest item. And if that's the case, then yeah, go this route. So this is the actual BIS for going staff. And it is a fair amount DPS higher than the realistic, than the one you're seeing here. But again, it needs to get that chronoluminescence, and then you have to go to the Flame Leviathan neck. So there's just some differences in it that make it much more difficult. You are looking at a fair amount more DPS, under 100, but up to 100. But it's it's going to be a lot more difficult, right? So you have to look at what's realistic, because if you aim for actual BIS and you shoot way lower than what you could have gotten by just aiming for realistic, and that doesn't do you any good. Other things to mention here, I'll go into each piece. A number of these you've seen have just been the same across the board, and that's because there's no other alternatives. Like there is no other 252 belt, there's no other 252 bracer, etc. The two boots are the Flame Leviathan boots and these. Again, you could go either of these. If this is less contested, then I recommend Boots of Fire Resolution because they're better for Arcane, and both of these sim about the same for Fire, Torment Week, and FFB. But Treads of the False Oracle are less contested, so that's why it's the more realistic option. Star Watcher's Binding, again, realist. It's not necessarily realistic, but there's nothing else to put on here, right? When I go through each slot here, I'll talk about alternatives and everything like that for each slot until you get this BIS piece, but there really just isn't any other alternative to put here, guys. It just kind of is what it is. All right. So that's Arcane FFB. As you can see, the reason this is also once again realistic is because there isn't really any differences. The only thing is those two off pieces. Like I said, FFB is then going to use 4 piece because that's just realistic. On that note, obviously, as you saw with, we could look at FFB Actual BIS, it uses chronoluminescence and leggings of the enslaved idol. But again, that's having only once you get both those off pieces is it better for FFB. It's not like if you have leggings of enslaved idol, you still just use 4 piece until you would get chronoluminescence. And additionally, Collar of the Worm Hunter isn't good enough. You can't do what Arcane does, which is Arcane can use, here we go, Collar of the Worm Hunter and leggings of the enslaved idol and just use 2 piece tier 8. That's not better for FFB. FFB would instead just use 4 piece. It's not until you get 2, well, really 3, but you know, yeah, two item level 252 pieces to replace your legs and your helm that becomes better for FFB than using tier 8 4 piece. So it's very unrealistic for FFB to not be running tier 8 4 piece. Again, the only difference between the Arcane and FFB realistic staff gearing is just those off pieces for the helm and the legs, which I covered, and just aren't that unrealistic. Fire Torment the Weak, however, if you're going to go Fire Torment the Weak with staff, then actually you end up not using Pharaoh's gloves, which, you know, isn't the worst thing in terms of being realistic for gearing, because tier 8 gloves not that hard to get. And then it uses leggings of the enslaved idols, but it does still need hit cloak and the hit neck. So if you're going the staff realistic route, you are getting the cloak, but you're not getting that neck, right? And making up that hit elsewhere, a little difficult to do because you're already using Petrified Ivy Sprig. If you're Alliance and you're getting the 1% hit buff, then that makes it a little easier. But again, this is why, like I mentioned before, I like going Arcane and FFB, just because it makes the gearing way easier, because FFB double dips, and so you can just be somewhere between that 8 to 11%, and that's usually pretty good. As you see here for FFB, yes, you are at 8.46%, right? I know someone's going to point that out to me, like, aren't you under hit cap? Yes, okay. Your Pyroblast and your Living Bomb can miss here. Okay, but it's still, this just sims better, and it's just realistic BIS wise than having to go a different route, right? It loses value past 8% for FFB because it's no longer benefiting your main nuke ability. And if you don't understand why that is, then check out my FFB double dips video, which is that it gains 6% hit from precision for Frostfire Bolt as opposed to just 3% like everything else. And so that's why. And if you can get the Flame Leviathan neck, great, go for it. That's gonna help out your FFB. It's gonna make up some of that hit. It's gonna be better. And then that does open you up to the possibility of getting chronoluminescence in the future. Probably not gonna happen. But you know, you could go that route, and it'll boost up your FFB and not be too much of a hit on your Arcane, because Pendant of Fire Havoc isn't necessarily bad. Even if you're not using the hit, it's only like a 30 DPS worse than the Sapphire. So even if you're not using this hit as the Arcane build, it's only like 30 some DPS worse than the Sapphire. The problem is, though, again, very contested to get Pendant of Fiery Havoc. So unlikely that you're going to be able to. It's just easier to try and go the Sapphire route and the hit cloak than to be trying to go for the Pendant of Fire Havoc, is just based on our loot prio situation and what I think, you know, a lot of people follow that fusion loot prio sheet. So kind of probably is going to be realistic for you too, but maybe your situation could be different. So again, make sure you're checking into that. And then, yeah, if you get Pendant of Fiery Havoc, that also, you could then, it opens up the possibility of going Fire Torment the Weak in the future if you need to, for TOGC, for magic absorption, or whatever it may be. Because if you do have Pendant of Fire Havoc, then it's just a simple switching out your gloves. Even if you do have Pharaoh's gloves, you could just then go the tier 8 gloves for that hit from them, and you'd be able to actually make the hit work for Fire Torment the Weak. Differences between actual BIS and the realistic aren't really there, just kind of because it kind of just is what it is. But there is the differences, obviously, for FFB and Arcane, which is that chronoluminescence and whatnot. Alright, and now to go through each of the different slots, I'm going to actually utilize the Olstivel Sim, and the main reason for that is 80 upgrades is great. I love it as a gear planner and everything. However, until they have a way to be able to sort gear by phase and also item level, it's just not very helpful to like look at, you know, all these different bracers and everything. And same with like the weapons. it's not as helpful as if I go to the sim. You can see the item level for each of them, so you can get an idea of like, well, oh, okay, this drops from 10-man hard mode, and these ones are obviously dropping from 25-man hard mode, and this is the phase that they're in, and just kind of all that information. You can just kind of quickly do that if you don't know this gearing just yet. And then also for this, I'll turn off my webcam because I'm covering up part of it. So yeah, now I'm going to use this to kind of just go through each of the different slots. And also, no, I don't normally have this big. I usually have it, you know, normal like this, but for the sake of the video, right, we're going to have this big. I'm not actually an old man. So first for weapon, there's definitely a number of other weapons that you can get before, like as upgrades, before you get your Staff of Endless Winter or Starshard Edge, depending on which gearing path that you're going. 238 weapons are from normal, 25-man normal, and the 245 are from 10-man hard mode, and then the 225 are from 10-man normal. Bottom line is, you know, I'll just kind of touch on it quick, I guess. So Runescribe Blade and Soul Scribe are both 25-man normal. Straight upgrades from Turning Tide, you're looking at 120 DPS increase from using Runescribe Blade, or I'm sorry, Soul Scribe, and like a 90 Runescribe as Arcane over Turning Tide. So that's kind of the caliber you're looking at. And Soul Scribe is obviously better than Runescribe for us, but either one would be fine. Ice Core Staff, huge. It's very good. If you're going the staff route, this is not too far behind Staff of Endless Winter, to be honest. We're only looking at about 50 DPS maybe. And so very good. And same with Fusion Blade. This is very good as well. Like, even if you're not using the hit, this is better than Soul Scribe and Runescribe Blade, even if you can't make use of the hit. And so if you're in a 10-man and for whatever reason other people don't need this, and you're still planning on going like the staff route, just pick this up, because then you have a hit one-hander just in case you need that in the future, and you can just use that until you get your upgrade. But so talk within your guild about a good way to go about handing out these temporary weapons upgrades. But obviously the best way to do it would be to prio these to people who aren't going to be getting the first Staff of Endless Winter, the first Starshard Edge, right? So that's how I would do that best. So that just makes sense to me. I would hope your guild is doing something like that too. And then obviously the people who need the hit should get the hit items, and there's the Intensity Staff, which is kind of similar to the 10-man Eye of Eternity Staff, where it just has a ton of hit on it. So if someone's using that, they could just maybe get this, and that's like a straight upgrade, and it just doesn't have to change their gearing around. You know, it'd be best to kind of just do it like that. Whereas people who are using hit items currently maybe get the hit items, and or at least the people who are going maybe Starshard Edge get the hit items. You could go like that too. The people who aren't currently using a hit weapon get the non-hit. Something like that makes sense to me. And then for offhanders, once again, guys, there just isn't that much. There's Cosmos is item level 252, and everything else is 20 items level lower. There is no other 252 offhands, and things like Ironmender, Leviathan, Fueling Manual, while they are upgrades over something like Matriarch Spawn, for instance, with Ironmender, it's still only about 40 DPS increase over Matriarch Spawn, which is still something. That's definitely an upgrade for sure, but it's nothing crazy, and that's kind of your best bet. Leviathan Fueling Manual is a hit offhand, so if someone needs hit, this should go to them. Igniter Rod, crit offhand, so this is kind of like just a straight upgrade to Cursed Spine. Just kind of think of them like that. And that's pretty much it for offhanders. I would definitely give these to the people who are going to be keep staying using a one-hander that aren't going staff. Makes most sense to me, because they're going to probably be using it for a while, because everyone needs Cosmos, and that's the only 252 offhand. So give these to the people who are going to be using one-handers. But for ranged items, it's pretty straightforward. Petrified Ivy Sprig is what we want. That's our BIS ranged weapon. It's got the hit that we need, and it's the only thing that's 245. Everything else is lower item level, and also it's going to be BIS going into phase 3, or still going to be BIS with phase 3 loot. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. So it's got that longevity, so try and get it. But obviously very contested, everyone needs it. So something that you could use in the meantime is Quartz Crystal Wand. So maybe you try and get this in your 25-man normal if you're going to be last on this on 10-man normal. If you're doing that inside the guild, you know, talk with your guildies, try and figure that out, because obviously someone who's getting Petrified Ivy Sprig shouldn't get the Quartz Crystal Wand, because this is a good hit substitute that you can use until you get the Petrified Ivy Sprig. And if you don't need hit off your wand, then try and get the Scepter of Lost Souls off 25-man normal General Vezix. And then this is also really good for Alliance players. If you're getting the Heroic Presence, you're getting that 1% hit, you can swap out your Petrified Ivy Sprig for this. It's just an easy way to be able to swap around gear depending on whether you're getting that 1% hit buff or not. Nurturing Touch, nothing too big to kind of talk about there, because it's only 225 item level, but it is a little bit of an upgrade over, say, like Wand of the Archlich. For Fire, it's about the same as Wand of the Archlich for Arcane. Scepter of Creation is a little bit of a buff over Wand of the Archlich for Arcane, and then for Fire and FFB, this is about a 40 DPS increase. So this is good if you don't need the hit, and you're currently using a Plague Igniter or Wand of the Archlich. Be a good little temporary upgrade. If you're not going to be getting Scepter of Lost Souls, then you could at least get this. So, determine in your guild who's getting that, but Scepter of Lost Souls is obviously the better non-hit one, but this is not terrible either. This is still an upgrade until you, of course, get the Petrified Ivy Sprig. And yeah, Helm is also pretty straightforward, because for Fire and FFB, you're going to want your tier 8 Helm, and you're going to then be using tier 8 4-piece. For Arcane, obviously, since it doesn't care about tier 8 4-piece, then if you can get Crown of Luminescence, it's the only item level 252 Helm, and so it's very good. And then FFP could use that as well as an off piece once you get the 252 leggings, but that's again going to be pretty rare to get both those, or at least not until later on in the phase for sure. So until then, for Arcane, Collar of the Worm Hunter, great pickup. You can utilize that hit, and the haste on it is very good, much better than the tier 8 Helm for Arcane. But for Fire and FFB, once you get tier 8 Helm and tier 8 4-piece, you're just going to be rocking that, so don't worry too much about these other ones. If you're currently using Hood of Rationality as your off piece, then I would say just transition to tier 8 4-piece and transitioning to a different off piece. You could also then go straight into Collar of the Worm Hunter until you get those other tier 8 pieces, for Arcane, but otherwise those are the main thing. For next, there's obviously the 252 necks that I've already talked about, Pendant of Fire Havoc and the Sapphire Amulet. There is another one, but this one has MP5 on it, so this is not what you're going to go for. But there is another neck to talk about, which is Pendant of the Shallow Grave. So this is a 239 neck, drops from 25-man normal Thorum, and it is actually pretty good. It's about 20-some DPS behind the Sapphire Amulet of Renewal for Arcane, and it sims about the same as Sapphire Amulet of Renewal for Fire and FFB. So if you're going a non-hit neck, this is actually a pretty good pickup. The reason I didn't talk about it before is because, again, your Arcane is going to suffer from it to a certain extent, and with the Fusion Loop Prile, Sapphire Amulet of Renewal is definitely something that you could, if you're following that loop prile, this is something that's in the wheelhouse of you being able to get. However, it is a 252 neck, and 252 eye level item, and so if your guild is going to have that count against you significantly because they view it as a high item level item, then maybe talk to them and instead say, hey, I'd go for this Pendant of the Shallow Grave if it means I can get a 252 item level item somewhere else, because this sims pretty close. Granted, your Arcane set is going to take a little bit of a hit, but it sims even like 5 DPS better for Fire and FFB, but that's a margin of error, so about the same, you could think of it. So this is actually a good way to go if that is the case with your guild. Just talk with them about it. Either way, the main thing is that whoever is getting Pendant of the Shallow Grave shouldn't be getting this, right? If the people who are up for this first should not be getting this, the people who are up for these last are the one who should be getting Pendant of the Shallow Grave, and actually the people who are going Sapphire, the non-hit neck, are the ones who should get this. So those are all things to keep in mind for neck. And then also, if you don't already have Wormrust Necklace of Power, this is still really good. If you don't have it, you can pick up the badge neck, or if you just need a way to drop hit for some reason, you could also go from Wormrust Necklace, the Wormrust neck, to Evoker's Charm. However, this is really good, so you can basically just rock this all the way until you get either Pendant of the Shallow Grave or you get that huge 252 item level neck. For shoulders, there isn't too much to say here. The main thing that we want is the tier 8. Whether it's tier 8 10-man or tier 8 25-man, you can go use the tier 8 10-man until you get tier 8 25-man, but tier 8 should be prioed to Mage. So this is one of the pieces that you should go for. It's chest and shoulder. So this is what your guild should be prioing you. Nothing else really matters. Once you get those, that's what you're going to use. So there really isn't too much to talk about here. And likewise, we can just go straight into chest. Same thing for chest. Your guild should be prioing you these because tier 8 is best for mages. As far as the Vank pieces, that tier 8 2-piece is just really good. And again, for tier 8 2-piece, we go shoulder and chest. So that's what you should rock. You could rock the 10-man until you get the 25-man, but yeah, it's pretty straightforward. That's what we go for, shoulder and for chest. Cloak, outside of the 252 item level cloaks that we've already talked about as far as your gearing path, whichever gearing path that you're going down. So there's the hit cloak from Iron Council hard mode, or there's the Algalon quest cloak from 25-man Algalon. Outside of those, there's also another 252 cloak, but it is a MP5 cloak, so just ignore that one. And then there's these two 232 cloaks, but you can ignore them as well because Pennant Cloak is better than both of them by 20 some DPS depending on your spec. So just get Pennant Cloak instead of these. I wouldn't worry about them. Pennant Cloak is also now from 10 man. It's a lot easier to get now, so yeah, I would say just go for Pennant Cloak. As well as there's also these 10-man cloaks to mention, which is the 10-man hit cloak that drops from Algalon 10-man, and then also the 10-man Algalon quest cloak, which is non-hit. So both those are good options. If you need hit, pick this up. And then if you don't need hit, if you want just a straight upgrade from Pennant Cloak, Sun Glimmer Drape is pretty good. It's not as much of an upgrade for Fire and FFB. It's only like 5 DPS more than Pennant Cloak because Pennant Cloak has crit and haste, and both those are really good for Fire and FFB. However, crit's not that great for Arcane, so the Sun Glimmer Drape is an upgrade from Pennant Cloak for Arcane. Only about 25 DPS, but still, if people in your 10-man don't need it, or you're not being prioed on one of the 252 cloaks, then you should get this, and then yeah, it's a nice little upgrade. And to put it in perspective, this is about 40 DPS worse than the 252 cloak from Algalon Quest. So it's not that much worse. So definitely something to pick up in your 10-mans as you're going along. Bracers is also pretty straightforward just because there's only one item level 252 and it's non-hit. It's the Grasp of Reason from XT hard mode. And outside of that, everything else sims worse as far as non-hit. So you're going to be using Unsullied Cuffs, and if you don't already have them, they're going to be easier to pick up now with 25-man dropping more loot and 10-man dropping 25-man loot for Nax and Sarth and EOE. So just go pick these up until you can do XT hard mode and get the Grasp of Reason. If you do need hit, you can get these off Kolagarn, 25-man normal, Bracers to Unleash Magic. They are pretty good if you do need the hit. So figure out who needs hit in your raid and then pile these accordingly. If you're someone who needs hit right now, then yeah, pick these up. They're going to be pretty good. But best in slot is obviously Grasp of Reason. Nothing comes close, and you're just going to rock Unsullied Cuffs until then. For gloves, the only other item level 252 glove outside of Pharaoh's gloves is Hand Wraps of the Vigilant, and these sim anywhere between 90 to 120 DPS worse than the Pharaoh's gloves depending on your fight duration. So I don't recommend going these unless they're rotting or it's really going to get you a lot of loot prio somewhere else, or no one wants to go, or you want to take one from the team, whatever it may be. But otherwise, Pharaoh's gloves should be prioed to mages because they're just that good for mages. They really benefit the mages the most just because the crit and haste both scale with Fire really well. So you should be able to get these depending, but it again depends on what your loot prio is for your guild. So I do highly recommend these over the Hand Wraps of the Vigilant, but these are a significant increase over everything else as well. They are still like 60 to 80 DPS better than any other option if as long as you don't need hit. If you do need hit, there is the 10-man hard mode Algalon gloves that you can get, which are Pulsar gloves, and those are really good if you do need hits. So those are good pickup if they drop and no one needs them or something like that, or you're low on prio for gloves for whatever reason, you need hit. Definitely pick these up, and that's also again assuming you don't need your tier piece from your gloves, and you're using your gloves as an off piece or something like that, or for Arcane where you just don't need you don't need more than 2 pieces, right? Otherwise for Fire and FFB, tier 8 gloves are pretty good if you do need the hit, depending on your situation. And so there's that. Another thing to mention is Touch of the Occult. These are badge gloves, so you can just get these for free basically once you get enough badges. So Touch of the Occult, it's sim about 60 DPS more than Gloves of Token Respect. So for both Fire and for Arcane. So, or even a little more than that for Fire. So these are definitely a good pickup if you're still using Gloves of Token Respect or something like that for your gloves. Hand Wraps of Plentiful Recovery are about 15 DPS more than Touch of the Occult for Arcane, but they sim about the same as Touch of the Occult for Fire FFB, and these are free. So I wouldn't waste any loot prio getting Hand Wraps of Plentiful Recovery if they happen to drop from Kolagarn in 25-man normal. I would just, only if they're rotting, say, hey, if it's not going to count against me for loot prio, I'll pick those up, and then you could just save you some badges. But outside of that, that's pretty much the only use, and then there isn't anything else to mention for any of the other gloves here. That's pretty much it. For belt, as you can see here, everything outside of Star Watcher's binding is 20 item levels lower or more, And the main thing to mention here is that there's 2 crafting belts coming out, Sash of Ancient Power and Court of the White Dawn. Sash of Ancient Power is the hit version, Court of the White Dawn the non-hit version, and both these are really good. So if you need hit, craft Sash of Ancient Power. It only sims 5 DPS worse than Leash of Heedless Magic, and that's assuming you aren't using the hit, for Arcane at least. So this is really good. If you don't have Leash of Heedless Magic and you're going to need some hit, this is incredibly good. And if you don't need the hit and you're pretty sure you're not going to need the hit on your belt item at all, then you can craft Court of the White Dawn, which is also really good. And this sims better than all the other options. Embrace of the Leviathan is a little bit better than Sash or than Court of the White Dawn for Arcane. So if this is rotting, you can pick it up. And it could save you some crafting, I guess. But Court of the White Dawn is a lot better for fire because of that crit. So and they sim better than the other normals. So don't worry about the other ones. And same with the Sash of Potent Incantations, the badge belt. The crafting ones are better. I know these cost gold. These are just badges. But if you can craft these, definitely the better way to go. And just to show you how good Sash of Ancient Power can be, it actually is used in the Arcane Horde Staff Actual BIS list that you use Sash of Ancient Power with the Flame Leviathan neck, Algalon Cloak, hit wand, and then the hit legs. And I don't recommend going this because this is going to be a lot more contested. Algalon Cloak is going to be a lot more contested, harder to get. And so all right now, obviously, Carnal Luminescence hard to get. But I'm just using this to illustrate the point that actually Sash of Ancient Power is really good. And so if you, just with the way your items work out and how you're getting things, you suddenly need hit and you can use Sash of Ancient Power to get it, that's a really good utilization of your belt slot. For legs, again, Leggings of the Enslaved Idol are the only 252, so outside of that, the main thing is like for your leg slot, for fire, you're going to be using tier 8 4-piece and using your legs as that. However, until you get that, let's say you're using Leggings of the Wanton, you're basically just going to want to wait until you get your tier 8 piece. Otherwise, if you're not using Leggings of the Wanton, you're probably using tier 7 2-piece until you get your tier 8 4-piece, and that's just what you're going to do for fire. However, for Arcane, there's a few legs to point out that you could pick up just as your off piece, since you don't need tier 8 4-piece, and so you could it could be better DPS upgrade to switch to those for your off piece over the tier 7 2-piece. And one of those is Leggings of Profound Darkness. If you don't need hit from the legs, then these are really good. They're just as good as Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, basically, if you don't need the hit, at least, from Leggings of the Enslaved Idol. So these just drop from 10-man hard mode Vezix, so if you can pick them up, really good pickup for off-piece for your Arcane. There's also Leggings of Lost Love, which aren't as good as Leggings of Profound Darkness, but are pretty close, about 15 or 20 DPS behind Leggings of Profound Darkness and Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, assuming you don't need hit, once again, from your leg piece. And these just drop from 25-man Thorm, so if they're not going to count against you for loot prio or something like that, or they're rotting in the main raid, whatever it may be, these are another little good pickup. And then there's also the leg wraps of the Master Conjurer, which are from badges. However, I don't necessarily recommend getting these. They only sim about 20 DPS, maybe 15 to 20 DPS more than tier 8 legs, and you're eventually going to get tier 8 legs, so I wouldn't necessarily waste the badges on these. You could, but that's assuming you don't even need the hit from this. So even if you don't need the hit from tier 8 legs, you could just use those, and yeah, they're only 15 to 20 DPS behind these. I would instead just try and pick up Leggings of Lost Love or Leggings of Profound Darkness. You should be able to get one of those eventually until you can get your Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, so that's what I recommend. For boots, I talked about it in the sets, but I'm going to touch on it here again, of course, is there's Boots of Fiery Resolution and Treads of the False Oracle for our 252 level boots, and one from Yogg-Saron, the other from Flame Leviathan. And the Flame Leviathan boots, they sim best for Arcane. They sim about 30 DPS more than Treads, and then Treads and Boots of Fire Resolution both sim about the same for Fire and FFB. So boots are obviously the better choice then, because they're going to be 30 DPS more than Treads for your Arcane set, and they'll be about the same for your Fire FFB set than they are Treads. But the problem is these are going to be more contested, but it depends on your guild. That's right, that's just based on the Fusion loot prio sheet and my guild, right? For your guild, it might be different. You might be able to get Boots of Fire Resolution, or your HDKP, whatever it may be. And if you can, yeah, definitely get Boots of Fire Resolution over Treads. But just know that Treads, they're not bad. They're about the same for Fire and FFB as Boots, and then they're basically the same. And then there's going to be a little bit worse for Arcane. Then outside of that, there are a lot of other 232 boots, as you can see here, but the thing to just keep in mind is 2 of these are craftables, the Spellslinger Slippers and the Savior Slippers. And the Spellslinger Slippers are ahead of everything else for Arcane outside of the 252 boots. So until you get your 252 boots, just craft these and you're going to be good to go for your Arcane set. And then they're also pretty good for the Fire and FFB set, and they're actually ahead of the Savior Slippers, even though Savior Slippers have crit just because of stat itemization. The Spellslinger Slippers are ahead of that for Fire and FFB, so you can just craft these and use them for both. And one little thing that you could pick up though is in your 10-man, Starlight Treads can drop from Elgalon. And if you can get these for fire, you could use these until you get treads or boots of fire resolution, because these sim about 50 DPS more than the Spellslinger Slippers, but only for fire and FFB. So not critical to pick them up, but if you can roll on them in a 10-man or whatever it may be and grab these, then they're going to be a good thing to use for your fire and FFB sets until you can get either treads or boots of fire resolution. For rings, our best are Conductive Seal and Nebula Band, as I've touched on before. So Conductive Seal, this drops from 25-man Mimiron Hard Mode Firefighter, and then the Nebula Band drops from 10-man Hard Mode Elgalon. And so until you get these, as you can see, there's a number of other rings, but a lot of them are MP5 rings, and they're not worth getting, so just pay attention to the ones that I point out. First, I will say Conductive Seal, this is BIS in Phase 3 as well, so this is Phase 3 BIS. So picking this up is definitely a good idea. Obviously, after Phase 3 comes out, you could still go back and pick this up for your BIS then, so it's not like you have to really worry about it or something like that. But just know that if you get this, then you're solid for Phase 3 for one of your ring slots. Another thing to mention is the Kirintor ring. This is now, it's been buffed, the upgraded version of it, and you pay 1,000 gold to upgrade your Kirintor ring to Inscribed Signet. And this is just as good as Signet of Manifest of Pain after the buff that Blizzard gave it. So if you already have the Kirintor ring, this is pretty good for just 1,000 gold, which isn't too much in Wrath of the Lich King nowadays. And it's, just as good as Signet of Manifest Pain. If you don't already have the Kirintor ring, though, then it's a lot more expensive. Then you're looking at 7,800 gold altogether. Then it's not really worth it. I don't recommend it then. But yeah, so there's that and Signet of Manifest of Pain. Outside of those, for non-hit options, there's Pyrelight Circle, which is a little bit better than both of those. Just drops from 25-man Ignis Normal. And then there's also Signet of Soft Lament, which is a tiny bit worse than Pyrelight Circle, or it can be a tiny bit better depending on your scenario. And this drops from 10-man Yogg-Saron Hard Mode, so if no one else is rolling on this in the 10-man, then roll on this, try and pick it up, and it's just going to be a nice little upgrade over Signet of Manifest Pain and Inscribed Signet of Kirintor until you can get your Conductive Seal or Nebula Band or both. For hit options, there's Frozen Loop and Shimmering Seal. Frozen Loop drops from 25-man Hodir, and Shimmering Seal is from 10-man Flame Leviathan Hard Mode. Both are pretty good as far as hit options. Shimmering Seal is a little bit better for Fire and FFB because it's got, it just is, with the way the stats work out, than Hodir. But Frozen Loop, if you need hit as your Arcane, which I find hard to believe because Arcane just has so much hit, but if you do, then Frozen Loop's going to be a better option than Shimmering Seal. But either one is going to be fine as far as a hit option for your rings if you're looking to get hit from your ring slot for some reason. And then, like I said, a lot of these other ones are just MP5 or not worth looking into, so don't worry about them. So for Trinkets, Flare of the Heavens and Scale of Fates are of course BIS for both Arcane, Fire, and FFB. And outside of that, Trinkets, first I'll talk about Arcane. There just isn't too much else for Arcane. There is Pandora's Plea, which is very niche though in terms of whether it can do well or not based on the int and how much extra mana it gives you for the fight duration. So I wouldn't worry about this too much, really at all, unless you're really good at simming and figuring out some things. Then it can be okay. If you didn't need any of the hit off of Dying Curse and you didn't have a better non-hit option, you could use this because their procs are very similar, but otherwise I wouldn't worry about it. These two trinkets are, mana gain trinkets, don't worry about them. There just isn't too much else for Arcane. Eye of the Broodmother just does not sim that well. Basically, you're still just going to be using Phase 1 trinkets until you can get Scale of Fates and Flare of the Heavens for Arcane. So Illustration of Dragon Soul for longer fights, Dying Curse for some hit and that good proc, Embrace of the Spider and Sundial if you don't have one of those, but you'll be able to get these eventually just with the loot changes. And then, Embrace of the Spider and Sundial for shorter fights other than Illustration. But Ulduar, the fights are longer, so Illustration is actually pretty decent for Arcane. And I doubt you need hit as Arcane, so not really worth mentioning the Elemental, Focus Stone, and Living Flame. But for Fire, if you can make use of this hit by then swapping around some other pieces of gear or something like that, Living Flame isn't actually that bad, but I wouldn't waste any loot prio on it or anything like that. It's still going to be worse than Scale of Fates, even if you can make use of the hit, but it's not a whole ton worse, you know, maybe 30 to 50 DPS worse. It drops from 25-man Razor Scale, so again, in your main raid, I wouldn't waste any loot prio on this or something, just if it's rotting or no one's going to use it and you know it's not going to count against you for loot, and you actually have a way to use it. But for Fire and FFB, Eye of the Broodmother actually is pretty good. It's going to be better than Illustration, going to be better than your other Phase 1 Trinkets, so as far as non-hit options. So this is actually pretty good. I recommend if you could be using Dying Curse and Eye of the Broodmother then. Once you get this, it's just from 10-man Razor Scale, so good pickup for your Fire and FFB sets. Alright, this is just a short section where I want to touch on Phase 2 BIS items that are also BIS in Phase 3, so maybe you want to put more emphasis on them so you don't have to worry about getting them in Phase 3. And that's basically just Conductive Seal, so 25-man Mimiron hard mode. This ring is going to be BIS in Phase 3 as well. Flare of the Heavens, General Vezek's hard mode, 25-man, BIS going into there, and then the Freya 10-man hard mode wand, Petrified Ivy Sprig, the hit wand that is BIS for all the sets, is also BIS in Phase 3. So those 3 items are going to be, you're going to get a lot of longevity out of them. And here I just want to talk about some 10-man items that are pretty decent to pick up. Pretty much all of these are going to be, of course, hard mode, except for Eye of the Broodmother. But yeah, Pendant of the Shallow Grave, really good neck if you can get this. Highly recommend. It's going to be close to Sapphire, and yeah, so this is just something really great to have as a temporary until you get your final BIS. Of course, the 10-man Algalon Cloak, other people are going to want this as well, but it's not that much worse, and then you have a good non-hit cloak option, and so if you can get this, definitely recommend. Fusion Blade, really good one-hander, especially if you can utilize the hit. This is just really good all around, so I definitely recommend it if you can get it. You know, other people are probably going to want it, but you know, eventually if you can grab it, then it's a great one-hand hit option for you to have on hand. It's 245 eye level, so really good. Similarly, Ice Core Staff, great non-hit weapon option if you're going the non-hit route, or if you're going staff route. This is just a great pickup as well, so figure out how to utilize that, you know, those weapons, but those are both great pickups. Igniter Rod, good for Fire and FFB. It's just, this is from Ignis, 10-man, so it's normal, so you can get a chance at this every week, and it's just a good option for your Fire and FFB offhand if you're using a one-hander. Pulsar Gloves, really good hit gloves. They drop from Algalon 10-man hard mode. Really good hit gloves. What else is there to say? If you can actually use hit from your glove slot, then these are really good. Leggings of Profound Darkness, talked about them as well. 10-man hard mode Vezek's, and they are just really good legs. If you don't need the hit off Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, these are basically just as good, close to it. Really good legs if you just don't need the hit from the leg slot. Starlight Treads, these aren't going to be better for Arcane, but for Fire, these are really good. These are only beat by Treads and Boots of the Fiery Resolution, so if you can pick these up in 10-man Algalon, then they're going to be a great option for your Fire and FFB set until you can get your endgame BIS. So definitely look out for those. Signet of Soft Limit, there isn't that many ring options for us, right? As I've talked about, Conductive Seal is the only 252 item level one, and everyone's going to want it. So Signet of Soft Lament is not that bad, or Lament, whatever you want to say. You know, you make fun of me in the comments. It's a little bit better than Signet and Scribe Kirin Ring, and it's about the same, close to it for Pyrelight Circle as far as which one's better. It's it's very close, and so that's a good option to pick up from 10-man Yogg-Saron hard mode if you can. Obviously, Nebula Band, this is one of our BIS rings, so you're going to want to get this eventually from Algalon. Obviously, whoever's getting this first shouldn't be getting this as well, so just make sure you're in your 10-man, you're splitting up the loot appropriately. Eye of the Broodmother, not good for Arcane, but for the EP is really screwing this up, so I can't even really show the trinkets that well. But Eye of the Broodmother, really good for Fire and FFB. Not that great for Arcane, so you're not going to use it for Arcane, but for fire and FFB, it beats out the other non-hit trinkets. So definitely recommend getting this eventually for your fire, because it could be a while until you get flare, right? And same with Scale of Fates. So this is going to be great for your fire and FFB sets. And then of course Petrified Ivy Sprig. This is from 10-man hard mode Freya, and it's just the best wand. It's a hit wand, so you need to make use of the hit, but it's still just, it's the only item level 245, and it's BIS going into phase 3, or BIS throughout phase 3, I should say. So you're going to want to get this eventually. Great wand. And here I just wanted to have a section on some 25-man normal items that are worthwhile to look out for. They're either, you know, realistic BIS, or just, you know, pretty good, decent upgrades until you get final BIS. So first of all, Collar of the Worm Hunter, I talked about this before. This is a pretty good helm, and it's basically realistic BIS, because it's unrealistic to probably get Crown of Luminescence as well as other stuff. And this is just a really good helm. So if you can pick this up eventually, definitely recommend doing that. It is from 25-man Razor Scale. Bracers of Unleashed Magic. These are from Kolagharn. Hit bracers. If you need hit and you could get it on your bracer slot, then these are really good, just because there is no other, you know, bracers really other than the 252 item level ones from XT. So if you can make use of these, really good. Soul Scribe, great one-hander if you're going the one-hander route as an upgrade until you can get your final BIS. Again, as long as it's not maybe going to count against you for loot prio. Same, Rune Scribe Blade is also a decent pickup. Soul Scribe's a little bit better, but Rune Scribe Blade is also not too bad. Iron Mender, just a decent offhand. There isn't really that many offhands, right? You know, there's just Cosmos at 252, and everything else is item level 232 or lower. So Iron Mender, pretty good if you can get it for Arcane. Just something to maybe look out for if it's, again, not going to count against you for loot prio. Scale of Fates, of course, our BIS, one of our BIS trinkets, and that drops from 25-man normal, so if you can get that. And then Scepter of Lost Souls, this drops from 25-man normal Vezix, and it's just a good non-hit wand. And then, you know, you can, so something to swap around in case you have a hit wand. You can, if you just need to drop some hit somewhere, you can swap this on. Or if you're Alliance and you get the 1% hit buff, you know, you're not always getting that. So then if you are getting that, you could swap off your hit wand for this. Just makes it for an easy swap. Just a really good non-hit wand. Definitely the best non-hit wand. So if you can pick that up, it's a good pickup. Oh, and I don't know why it got removed, but Embrace the Leviathan, I do want to actually mention that for 25-man normal items. This is actually, can be for Arcane, pretty decent over the Craft Belt if you can pick this up and it's not going to count against you for loot prio. So if you can, you're not going to use it for Fire and FFB, you'd rather use the Crafted Belt. So that's why the Crafted Belt is just good for both. But you can get this for free, then you could use this over the Crafted Belt for Arcane. It's going to be a little bit of a boost, anywhere between 10 to 30 DPS, depending on a number of other factors. And lastly, people have asked for like a Thatsmybis as well as optimal gearing path, so I'm going to talk about that some here. Here's what I have for the Thatsmybis. Flare, number one, just because it's a super good trinket. It's highly contested, and it's great for both of our specs. And a lot of this is just based on how much contested items are, right? So 252 weapons, also very contested. Going to be hard to get one, so I put that up high. Same with Scale, it's another trinket, so once you get Flare, if you're getting Flare first, you're probably not getting this, but I still would put it up there high on your Thatsmybis, so people know, like, yeah, it is definitely something important to you. Pharaoh's Gloves, another item that there isn't too much in between from 232 to 252, which are, they're the 252 gloves. They're also highly contested, very good for us. Grasp Reason, same kind of concept there, same with Star Watcher's Binding. Conductive Seal, there is some other options at 239, but this one carries over into phase 3, so it being phase 3 BIS just kind of makes sense for putting it on here as well. And after that, it's going to be kind of down to your situation. And so here I'm going to talk about that some now, why I kind of have those items on there in an optimal gearing path. Mages are, it's a really good choice for us to be the first ones to receive tier 8, so I think that, you know, talk to your guild, that should be where those are getting prioed. So something that's like your first things you should be getting is chest and shoulders from the guild for tier 8. You can eventually buy tier 8 helm then with badges, and eventually get legs as well, and there you go, you're gonna have 4-piece tier 8. You should pretty early on. You're going to use this for obviously Fire and FFB, and you're also going to use it for Arcane until you get those off pieces like Collar of the Worm Hunter, like I talked about, or Leggings of the Enslaved Idol, but those aren't going to be for a while, right? But you can pick up Leggings of Profound Darkness from 10-man. And then, like I said, I made this list because just mainly I prioritize it based on how things are contested, just how contested they are. But it's also, some of it has to do with what other options you have from 10-man, right? So like, I don't have Cloak on there because you can get the 10-man hard mode Algalon Cloak, and that's pretty dang good, so you can get that from 10-man. for neck, you can also get Pendant of the Shallow Grave from 10 man, and that's really good. So that's why I don't have a neck prioritized on there, because you can get a really good neck from here, and it's gonna be awesome. Like this neck is really good. So there's no point in wasting loot prio on one of these necks when you can just get this one and rock it until towards the end of the phase and get these. There's other more important items. Now that same concept can be applied to weapons, but weapons are just so contested that's why I still put them high up on that list. But you know, you can get the Ice Core Staff 245 eye level from 10 man Hodier hard mode, and that's pretty good. And likewise, if you're going Starshard Edge, you can get Fusion Blade while waiting for Starshard Edge, and Fusion Blade from 10 man is also a pretty good weapon. So you know, you have those options, but with bracers, you don't have any option like that. There's just Unsullied Cuffs and Grasp of Reason. That's it. So that's why I actually put Grasp of Reason on that list. For trinkets, there is another option for fire, right? You can get Eye of the Broodmother, and if you're getting flare, you're probably not going to get scale. So, and that's fine. You get flare, and then you also get Eye of the Broodmother from 10 man Razor Scale, and you're going to be good to go on fire. And then your arcane, yeah, it's just going to use flare and one of the phase one non-hit trinkets, and that's fine until you can eventually get scale, if you ever do. For wand, our BIS one is from 10 man Freya hard mode, so that's another really good 10 man. Rings, again, I put Conductive Seal on there because it's BIS into phase 3, but you don't necessarily have to do that. If you care about getting geared up the fastest way possible, then you know, one of our BIS rings is from 10 man, it's Elglon, and then also you could get Signet of Lament from 10 man Yogstra on hard mode, and that's a pretty good ring. And then you can just rock those until towards the end of the phase and eventually hopefully get Conductive Seal. Boots, another one where I don't put them on there because you can get Starlight Treads, which is pretty dang good for fire, and you can also, there's craftables. I do put Star Watcher's binding on there, even though there are the crafted belts, and those are really good crafted belts, just because that one is really contested and it's really good for fire. And there's no like 239 ones in between or anything like that, but I could see you putting this one lower if you wanted to, just because there are the craftables, and those can be really good, especially Sash of Ancient Power if you can make use of that hit. And then Pharos, again, there's nothing in between. There is the Pulsar gloves if you could use hit, but a lot of times we're not needing hit, so that's why I put the Pharos on there, and just because they're so contested, but they're also just really good. So there's that too. But as far as optimal gearing path, it kind of comes down to what 10 man items are going to drop for you, but just keep in mind all those 10 man items that I just went over. There's a lot of really good ones that you can use to gear up your character in combination with strategic 252 ones. So, you know, I wouldn't be wasting loot prio on like the 252 necks when there's something like Pendant of the Shallow Grave to get. Same with Cloak. You can try and get the Elglon Cloak from 10 man as opposed to getting the 252 ones. Let someone else maybe get those first, because you can be more strategic with your choices based on the 10 man items. And I go over those 10 man items earlier in the video, both in the 10 man section of like items to look out for in 10 man, as well as in each of the slots. So just keep all those items in mind when you're creating your That's My BIS. And when I create my That's My BIS, I create it based mainly on just what's the most contested, so that the guild knows that I care about those items, because those are going to be hard to get because they're so contested, and so I just put them a higher prio. But you can also do it just strategically, as I just talked about. All right, everyone, that was a long one. If you made it to the end of the video, congratulations, you deserve a prize or something. Definitely went a little lengthy there. Didn't do a full script, and just instead went off the cuff, which made it lengthier, but writing a script for this thing was going to be a monster. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do hope it helped. It took a lot of work. So hope it helps, and if it did, drop me a like and subscribe, and also drop me a follow at twitch.tv/Crateria. Really appreciate that. We got the Ulduar launch race coming up here on Thursday, so I hope you're able to make it out for that. If you're not, then you're probably in the launch race yourself, and good luck to you. And just good luck to you in Ulduar in general. And then there's also Discord link is in the description if you want to join the Discord. Join in on Mage discussion or ask me questions, although the best place to ask me questions is during the stream, so hop in there if you ever do have any questions for me. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Good luck in Ulduar. Cheers.
Remember, guys, we want to maintain that 6-yard spread. Should we get a shock blast here?
Wow, someone's already dead? What the fuck?
Drift, get being. Coffin Cat, don't let that happen again.
Damn! dig, you fucker! I saw that cheeky little slash sit
Yes, three,
teabag
two,
on me,
one.
you son of a bitch! I hope
Things-
someone else died
Yes,
because you got that in, you motherfucker. Why didn't you heal me? You're
fire
right
on the
next to
boss.
me. Where was my heals? You son of a bitch.